Hello, my name is Judy, Judyannet from Kenya, a change maker, a community activist, and an African crusader. And I will be hosting today's discussion on behalf of NAYD. So to begin with, a developed Africa has food security at its core, which means that agriculture plays such a big role in the process of development in Africa. But the question is, who's feeding Africa? And who owns the process of producing the food that Africa is eating? And as such, why do the young people in Africa prefer other occupations to agriculture? And all these questions led NAYD to ask the question, is agriculture too cool, too dirty to be cool for the African youth? And with me today, I have James from Malawi. James is a human rights activist, an environmental and climate justice activist from Malawi. He has a strong background in youth work, youth development projects, planning and youth capacity building programs, community mobilization, human rights and advocacy, HIV/AIDS, behavior change, and all of this is obtained over 5 years of involvement in development projects, including agriculture. Help me welcome James to the program. James, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, fine. So James, I'm going to ask you the first question. I'm going to ask you to say hi to the people and tell us why it was important for you to take part in this discussion. Is agriculture too dirty to be cool for the youth?
Thank you so much, Judy.
Yes.
As Judy introduced me, my name is James Gondwe. I work as the Executive Director of Center for Youth and Development in Malawi, and I'm also working as the Publicity Officer for NAYD. I look at Africa as the core bone, or the core means of raising resources in Africa is from agriculture. And considering that, I also noticed that the participation of young people in agriculture is dwindling each passing day. And then I believe that in future we may not be able to have, normally the people that are producing food are those people who are in the older ages, or those people that have retired, and young people are not participating. And myself, as a youth activist, I feel that young people should be able to participate in agriculture and should be on the core of producing food. That's why I feel that it is very important for me to participate in this conversation and give out my ideas in terms of how best we can work out and improve the participation of young people in agriculture.
James, I'm going to ask you a question. So why do you think most people prefer to do other things? For example, work in banks, work in other companies, rather than take part in agriculture? You know, why exactly are the young people preferring other occupations to agriculture?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I personally believe that many people, normally the trend is that so much as agriculture is producing a lot of profits, and I believe that the African continent, in terms of resources, I think most of the African countries depend on agriculture. But then I believe that agriculture now seems to be like the investments that are there in agriculture are too small to be attractive for young people. You notice that most young people from Africa basically farm on family land. And because they're farming on family land, it means that they can only produce very few yields. And because they're producing very few yields, and then if they can sell that, and mostly what they produce is for food only, they are not producing for selling. So that means agriculture is really like the investments that are there in agriculture are too small for them to be attractive. At the same time, I also look at the economic environment, the financing environment is also not very conducive for young people to participate in agriculture. You notice that there are very few agricultural loans out there. And for young people to participate, they don't have capital, they don't have like money to buy farm inputs and the like. It is very difficult for them to ably participate in agriculture. That is another reason. At the same time, also I've got an issue with land as a capital resource. You notice that governments in Africa are not providing for conducive policies to be able to provide land to people to farm on. Mostly you notice that, like, for example, I'll give an example of Malawi as a country. You notice that there are a lot of most big companies are the ones who are owning a lot of land, while people are owning very little land. And the small lands that they are owning, it is not enough for them to produce food, even for them to feed like throughout the year. So that is another challenge that we're facing in Africa for people to be able to produce and find people to participate in agriculture. Yeah.
Okay, James. Before we go on, I'd like you to tell us about the situation in Malawi. I was reading a while ago about a project that was introduced in Malawi that at some point Malawi was facing such adverse conditions of food insecurity, and then the government introduced a program. So I'd like you to tell us how exactly what is the situation in agriculture in Malawi, especially in the community where you live? Tell us about the local community, the involvement, who owns who actually does the farming. Tell us the situation of agriculture in Malawi, if you don't mind.
Thank you so much. I think you are very right that Malawi faced a lot of challenges in terms of food production in the past years. Mostly because we had very few strategies that would be able to provide farm inputs to farmers. But then the government introduced the Farm Input Subsidy Program. Unfortunately, the Farm Input Subsidy Program is a targeted program. We're supposed to provide farm inputs to only people that are in a targeted criteria. For instance, we're looking at people who are not able to buy farm inputs on their own. So the government introduced the program so they can be able to support this. And these mostly are vulnerable households, maybe mostly headed by grandparents or headed by women. However, it is also facing challenges in terms of, because it is highly politicized, at the same time there's a lot of corruption. So the corruption that is there is also making the farm input subsidy program, like mostly you'd find out that the farm inputs end up with people who are not even on the targeted criteria. So that is the challenge in terms of farm inputs. But then, in a way, the farm input subsidy program has helped to reduce issues of food insecurity in Malawi. Families now are able to produce food that can be able to end up to the next harvesting season. But then you would see that young people are not really the target in terms of the farm input subsidy program. It is for those households that are very vulnerable. And because young people are not participating actively in agriculture, if I can tell you, like, if you look at the young people that are participating in agriculture in Malawi, you notice that it is mostly young people that are maybe not educated, and young people who are living in rural areas. And these young people participate in agriculture not because they want to, but then they don't have any other choice. They don't have anything to do apart from farming, so they end up farming in their own communities. And as already pointed out earlier on, this farming is not that they're farming maybe for commercial purposes. Mostly they're farming because they want to find food for them to eat. They're farming for subsistence only, like they're farming on their own farmland, and then they also have got very few farm inputs, and then that is the only type of farming that these young people can participate in. But then we have got a situation where young people who have got the capacity, probably maybe they've been educated to some level, and then they've got the capacity to better understand or adopt the technologies that are out there in terms of farming. These young people do not participate in farming. They would rather move to find another job, probably a white-collar job, or maybe, and mostly this has resulted in what we're calling rural to urban migration. You will see that in Malawi, there are a lot of young people who are moving from the rural areas to the urban areas. And mostly the reason why they're moving from the rural areas is that they are searching for a greener pasture. And mostly the greener pasture is that they're searching for jobs out there in the urban areas. Unfortunately, Malawi is also affected by the high unemployment rates. And because there are no jobs even in the cities, in the urban areas, young people end up just staying in these urban areas. While if they had stayed back in their own rural areas, I think they would have been able to participate in agriculture and then maybe probably earn money through agriculture. At the same time, I also look at issues to do with policy. I think the government really is trying in terms of youth employment, but then I think they've invested very few efforts in agriculture as a vocational skill. Mostly you will find that the government is carrying out vocational skills, they're training young people in vocational skills, but then the focus is on maybe the technical ones. We'll look at bricklaying or carpentry, welding and the like, but not agriculture as a vocational skill. So that is another challenge that is there, that is also forcing young people to move away from agriculture.
Okay, James. So you've mentioned that, you've mentioned technology. Thank you for telling us the situation in Malawi. But I have a question. Don't you think that the funding that comes from the government is not, meant for the young people, because the young people are not taking part in agriculture, and even as maybe the government funds project, the government probably funds vulnerable people, like people living in the rural areas, and and not specifically to the youth, because in the first place the young people are not taking part in agriculture. So when we talk about funding, where can the where can the young people get capital, and does it necessarily mean that the young people must own land for them to farm?
I think what is more important is that I think the government is not investing a lot of efforts in making sure that young people also participate in agriculture. So much as we're talking that, so much as we're saying that the farm input subsidy program is not specifically targeting people, one of the reasons might be that young people are not participating. But then I believe that the government can do a number of projects or interventions that can help young people to participate. Young people have to be motivated for them to take part in agriculture. That is my belief. That's one. And secondly, I also believe that the government can try to create, for example, they can create what we're calling agricultural schemes. If the government can create an agricultural scheme specifically for young people, then I'm very sure that young people will be able to participate. At the same time, governments can look at issues to do trainings and capacity building for young people, so that young people should be able to participate in agriculture. If we go to, if I can give you a scenario of the rural area in Malawi, for example, you will notice that let's say we've gone to one catchment area, which is a rural area, for example, you will see that that area is very good at producing maybe groundnuts. The government can simply say, okay, this area is good at producing groundnuts. Why don't we invest in young people so that young people from this area should be producing groundnuts? So the government can simply create a groundnut scheme in that area, and then young people should be able to participate in agriculture by maybe growing groundnuts. And then the government should also be able to provide market for the product that young people are producing. So you have also talked about, should young people have access to land, or should have land of their own for them to participate in agriculture? I think that question is varied. It's varying because, one, I think, yes, if young people can have land allocated for them, that can also mean that they have got a capital, land resource as a capital, and therefore they will be able to grow the crops or be able to participate in agriculture because they've got that resource. At the same time, I also think that there are some young people out there that have got the customer land, the land that is owned by their own parents. So for those young people, that means the land is already there. All that they need is that they just need that catalyst. We just need to motivate them or inspire them to be able to take part in agriculture. We already have got some situations of, I've talked about young people who are participating in agriculture. They're participating because they don't have a choice. They don't have the resources for them to be able to, or they don't have the qualifications for them to move to the urban areas and participate maybe, or be able to be employed in other, maybe the white collar jobs. These young people are farming on their own land, the land that was owned by their parents, or a customer land. So the problem with these young people is that mostly they're facing a challenge of the farm inputs. They don't have enough farm inputs for them to participate in agriculture. If government and other stakeholders, maybe organizations or companies, can work out a way to say they provide resources to young people as well, that would really help them to participate in agriculture.
Okay, James. One question there, though. You said that probably land can be allocated to the young people. But let's be honest here, James.
Yeah.
There's no way the government is going to allocate land to young people. You know, just tell them, take this piece of land and farm on it. I'll give an example of Kenya. Land is a big issue in Kenya, you know, dating back to the colonial times and up to now. Land is an issue. And you have even communities, you know, fighting over land. Saying this land belongs to me, this land belongs to me, and then we have very few individuals in Kenya that own massive pieces of land in Kenya. So land is a big issue here. So, and when you say that probably we can have land allocated to them, I don't see a situation where any African government will allocate land to any young person and tell them, here, take this piece of land and farm. Don't you think so?
I think there is a possibility for governments to be able to allocate land. I'll give you an example of Malawi piloted what we call Malawi Land Reform Program. Probably I think it was piloted in about 2 to 3 years ago. The Malawi Land Reform Program was meant for, it was piloted in 4 districts, and the aim was that the government was trying to voluntarily obtain land from underutilized lands by estates. That is like the big companies which have got the estates. So the government was obtaining land from them and then giving it to people. This project did not specifically target young people, but then it happened. It was possible. People got land from like estate owners, and then they used that land to give to people that do not have land. So I think it is very possible. If the issue here, the big issue here is about policy. You know, there is land out there, big estates own lands, but then the land, some of the land is also underutilized. It is not even farmed because maybe the companies also do not have resources for them to farm on that land. So what we're saying is that we're talking about an issue of food here, food security for countries, 1. 2, we're talking about an issue of livelihood. And then we're also talking about a lot of young people being unemployed. So also talking about issues of employment here. So if the government can look at this issue critically and try to develop policies specifically to make sure that young people have got land, have got access to land. At the same time, I also believe that here in Malawi, there is what we're calling customary land. You will notice that chiefs own some land, and this land that is owned by chiefs, mostly maybe it is also just staying. So what can government do is to engage these chiefs to say, okay, why don't you use this land to benefit young people in your own community, for example. So what's going to happen next is that if the chiefs say, yes, I think I can use this land to benefit my own people in my community, then they can simply give that land to young people to say, in form of a scheme, to say, let's come up with a scheme here, and then young people should be farming on this as a group, not as individuals. So I think young people will be participating in agriculture. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you. And then you also mentioned that you know, there's a lot of young people moving from the rural areas to urban areas, especially in Malawi, in your country. But I see people doing urban farming these days. I have an example of my own group, Life Skills Oasis in Kenya, and they do urban farming these days in a slum called Kiandutu in Kenya. So they plant vegetables using sack farming methods and vegetables basically. So why wouldn't the young people moving from the rural areas to the urban areas try and engage in urban farming, for example?
The big issue here, Jude, is that we need to recognize that these young people are running away from farming already from the rural areas. And because they're running away from farming, they have moved to the cities or to the urban areas. And then, according to them, what they're looking for a better job. Because they believe that farming is not as good a job for them because maybe they are educated, a little educated. Now, if this, I believe that urban farming is one, I think it's a good innovative strategy that can be utilized in Africa so that young people should be able to participate in agriculture. But then it still comes back to here in Malawi. The situation that we have is that in most urban areas, they are mostly densely populated. And because they are densely populated, in these urban areas, we do not have that land as we can have in rural areas. That's one. And then that can already hinder young people's participation in agriculture. And then secondly, I also look at young people also. The other thing why young people are moving from rural areas is that they believe that in rural areas there are no resources for them. For instance, you look at here in Malawi, we will notice that there is no issue of information technology in rural areas. Young people cannot have access to, for example, to internet or even to a computer in a rural area. But then if they go in the cities, in the urban areas, they have access to that. So it's like, it is not only that they're running away from agriculture, but then they're also moving towards the route of what we're calling the pull factors that are pulling them to the city. If they go to the cities, to the urban areas, they have access to those resources that they require. So I believe that it is very important. It is possible for young people to engage in urban agriculture. But what is important is that there should be a catalyst. There should be something that we need to motivate them. We need to talk to them. We need to actually inspire them to participate in that. I also believe that the biggest challenge that we have is that we have not cultivated the culture of agriculture in young people from that tender age. I think if we had cultivated that culture while young people were still children, young people were still children, then I'm sure as they're growing up, they're cultivating into that culture, they will be inspired, they will know agriculture is important, and then they will grow like in that agricultural spirit, and then they'll be able to participate when they grow up.
Okay, so actually, I think why the young people are not, motivated to do agriculture right from when they are kids is because when they are growing up, they see that who actually, who's farming. Right now in Africa, probably 60% of the agriculture activities are being led by women. So if children grow up saying, just their mother's farming, and then they don't even see high returns of the activities that their parents are doing. So there is no way they would want to do the same thing that their parents are doing. But anyway, moving on, let's talk about technology. You already said that people, especially young people, move from rural areas to the urban areas in search of technology. So how can we ensure that we incorporate technology even in rural areas, and then in what ways can the young people use technology to make sure that they carry out agricultural activities at a better level, than when they are not using technology?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And then I also look at the issues to do with mechanization as one factor that is very important. I tell you that agriculture, as it is not appealing at the current situation in Malawi. Agriculture is not appealing to young people. Young people actually are appealed to situations that are actually probably, let's say they have technology in them. So young people are actually attractive to that. That's one. Secondly, I would look at if you look at the issues to do with learning these days. If we're talking about learning, I think technology is a big factor for young people to learn. You look at issues to do with the mobile phones. We're looking at issues to do with the computers, the internet, and then the resource centers for them to learn. So I think what we can do is government and other stakeholders should try to mechanize agriculture, give out machinery for farming. But then in Malawi, there is a project by the Ministry of Agriculture that is looking at machineries for maybe for agriculture. But the challenge is that this process is expensive. It is expensive because the farmers have to hire out those machines. They have to hire from the government, and then they have to pay something. At the same time, the farmers have to buy fuel for the tractors, and then the tractors also need to work on a big land. And then you look at most of the farmers that we have in Malawi, the land is not that big. So it's like these machines, so much as they are there, they're not really helping. So if the government can work out a way to actually reduce the costs of mechanization, that can really help, one. Secondly, we also need to bring to the rural areas technology, issues to do with mobile networks. if mobile networks can go to the rural areas, young people should be able to access mobile phones in their own rural areas. That can also help to make sure that young people remain in their rural areas, they remain in their own rural areas. At the same time, they'll be able to participate in agriculture that way. Then we can also work out, we can also introduce programs where young people should be able to, young people can be able to actually learn through maybe the internet, through computers. If we can have what we're calling resource centers or learning centers in the rural areas, I'm sure that that can be another way of making sure that young people stay in their own areas. Then we need to look at issues to do with transport. Transportation is another big issue. If you harvest your yields, you should be able to sell them in time, so that young people or whoever or the farmers should be able to sell their products in time. So we have to look at issues of transport, and then we can also introduce low-cost factories in the rural areas. These low-cost factories can help to add value to the very same products that are produced by these young people. So I think these are the key areas that we can try to work on and make sure that we incorporate technology in agriculture.
All right, James. So now you've already talked about you already talked about the low cost factories that the government can try and set up in rural areas to ensure that products are processed within a short span of the time that they are produced. So the other question, or rather the other point of discussion, is market. I remember when I was growing up, we'd grow crops, we'd grow potatoes and maize, and then we'd of course we'd put a lot of inputs into them. You're talking about labor, you're talking about fertilizer, you're talking about the time, and then after you've finished, then what happens to the product that you've harvested? Market comes into place. And when we are talking about markets, and especially in Kenya, I'll tell you about brokers, people, the middlemen between farmers and market, people who connect farmers to the market. And these people, what they basically do is exploit the farmers, so we say probably they'll buy a product from the farmers at a lower cost, and then when they sell it to the market, they sell it at a very high price. So they actually end up making a lot of profit at the expense of the farmer. So another another issue that might actually cause the young people to move away from agriculture, I believe, is market, which because market translates of course into yields and money. So what do you think? How do you think the market should be addressed for the young people to get back to agriculture?
Thank you so much for the question. And maybe I should start by recognizing, I think the point that you've raised is very important. I think it's the same in Malawi. In Malawi, we are challenged by issues to do with markets. I think market is a big challenge. And for sure, it can really push away young people to participate in agriculture. I'll give you a scenario where in Malawi, the product that is raising a lot of money for people in Malawi is tobacco. And tobacco is sold at the Auction Holdings Limited. And at the auction, that means it's sold by auction, through auction. And then normally what happens is that we've got the buyers. These are the tobacco buyers. I think we've got 4 key companies that are buying tobacco from Malawi. And then these are the ones that determine the price. And the government tries to set the price, but then they don't have control in terms of buying. So much as the product, there is big supply, then the buyers are reducing the prices. So that is a big challenge. But then at the same time, we've got these other products that that people are selling, the farmers are selling. We'll look at issues to do with potatoes, maize, tomatoes, soya, and the like. I think the most important thing is that we need to make sure that we need to work on value adding. If we add value to these products, farmers would be able to sell these products at least at a higher price than selling them as raw materials. Because if we sell them raw, the challenge is that they are sold at a cheaper price. And then the bigger challenge, I think you have already alluded to, is that we've got the middle buyers. Middle buyers have affected market in Malawi so much. we have scenarios where middle buyers can even sell at actually ×2 the price that they bought that product. So if governments, I would suggest that government and other stakeholders should work on making sure that these markets are available where the products are being produced. That is in the rural areas. If we can work on making sure that buyers are there in the rural areas, that is one. If we can work on that. Secondly, we work on value adding. And then we work on controlling the prices of buying products. Government should be able to set minimum prices. If government can control that, regulate the minimum price of buying products, I'm sure it can help, and then it can also motivate, or it can also, it can motivate and young people to participate in agriculture. Because if the government, let's say, they've set the minimum price of maize at an agreed price, and make sure that all buyers, where they want or don't, they should make sure that they're buying that price, that they're buying at that price. That would really help. So I would look at value adding as one. Secondly, making sure that the buyers are available in the rural areas. And thirdly, working on controlling or regulating the by putting a minimum price at each and every product. That can help.
Okay, James. Finally, before we take a short break, I'd like us to talk about specialization. People carrying out agricultural activities, especially in Africa these days, there's a lot of duplication of effort. If probably I'm a farmer, I'm growing potatoes and maize, for example, and my neighbor is growing the same kind of product, and my other neighbor is doing the same, and probably the whole village is actually doing the same. So if all of us are producing potatoes and maize, what happens when we come to the market, and what happens when we actually need people to come and buy the produce from us? So how do we ensure that young people, when they actually move into agriculture, they take part in specialization? They diverse, they take they produce other things, besides what basically is being produced. How do we do that?
I'll share with you the project that is being implemented in Malawi. I think it started some time ago, and it is still running. Now it is more of a trust. Then it was a government project, and then I think it has moved to become a trust. And as a trust, it's more of a special organization that is running its own. Activities. But then the activities are focusing on agriculture. This trust is called One Village One Product. And then, as I've already said, it was a project by the government. One Village One Product looked at identifying the skills, or what is viable, or what is feasible in a certain area. For example, it looked at what can this community grow. So if that community, the soil is very good in production of cassava, then the community is trained in cassava growing. And then they go to another community, they also look at what is it that this community, what crop can better grow in this community. So if it is fruits, let's say maybe mangoes and the like, then they choose the mangoes and then they grow the mangoes. He looked at that project as one innovative project that can help reduce issues to do with duplication, and can also help even in terms of marketing. Because if we can simply identify what better crops can grow in certain areas, and then we concentrate on that, even buyers will be able to know. If you want to buy cassava, they'll be able to know where to buy cassava. If they want to buy fruit, they'll be able to know where to buy fruits. So I think I looked at this project as one innovative project. But then I also look at issues to do with diversification as another key factor in choosing what crops to grow, and issues to do with specialization. Diversification is another key important factor, because apart from issues to do with market, I'm very sure that developing countries are affected by climate change. And if you simply rely on one crop, it is one crop, and that crop is affected maybe by rains and the like, then you don't have anything to eat that year. So I'll look at issues to do with diversification as very important as well. farmers should be able to diversify their crops. And then if young people are engaged in agriculture, then they should be able to diversify their crops as well. If they're specializing in certain crops, but then they should also be able to diversify.
We collected these questions from young people interested in agriculture in Africa. And so the first question came from Bernard Kibet of Boresha Life Empowerment Group. And he asks, how can CBOs acting in the area of agriculture get access to capacity building and technical assistance?
Yeah, I think that's a very key question, and it's very important because I think what is coming out is that if we're talking about young people to be able to participate in agriculture, whether we want it or not, we need to build their capacity for them to participate in agriculture. And if they're asking a question about capacity, I'm very sure that that is a very key and important question. One thing is that I'll give a scenario of Malawi as well, but then one thing that I can say is that the Ministry of Agriculture is mandated to provide what we call agriculture extension services. And then what is supposed to happen is that these CPOs, community-based organizations, should be able to meet with the agriculture extension workers, the staff from the Ministry of Agriculture, talk with them and ask for advice pertaining to agriculture. And I'm very sure that these staff, extension workers, should be able to provide this service to them, the capacity building. They can simply choose whatever they want to learn, and then the extension staff should be able to provide. At the same time, I think these organizations need to be proactive. They need to be able to engage other institutions, even non-government organizations. If they can engage in government organizations that are able to, that focus also on agriculture, these organizations should be able to provide this technical assistance. So the technical assistance can come in form of like training, a capacity building, or it can come in the form of an extension service, or at times it can also come in form of a material support, in-kind support. They can be able to provide them with the farm inputs, or mostly the farm inputs, and then apart from that, the actual training and the capacity building. In Malawi, the challenge that we have at the moment is that Malawi adopted what we call the demand-driven approach in accessing the extension services. So the demand-driven approach in accessing the extension services, this means that extension workers, what they simply do is that if they come to an area, they simply say what they do, and it ends there. And it's the role of those people that want to learn to demand. So the most important thing is that these extension workers are being paid by government, or they're being paid by or NGOs, but they are mandated to provide us with a service. And we as young people, we as people in the communities, the community-based organizations, we should be able to demand that service. And they won't demand it, they'll provide to us. If we don't demand it, they won't provide us with a service. So the most important thing, what is imperative here, is that we should demand. Yes, Judy.
Okay, fine. Now, before we move on to the next question, you mentioned CBOs, and I'm interested in knowing what's the role of community-based organizations and NGOs when it comes to agriculture and the youth in Africa. Other actors besides the government and the state.
Okay. I think CBOs, community-based organizations, have got a very key role in agriculture. I'll give you a scenario of the community-based organizations that we're working with, and myself coming from a youth organization as well. We have got a role, and I'll give you scenarios of what we're supposed to do. So, for instance, Center for Youth and Development. I'll give an example. Center for Youth and Development. We work on agriculture. We have got a project that we're implementing. The project that we're implementing is that we're saying that the future is in the soil project. So the future is in the soil project is focusing on providing capacity building and extension services on focusing on soil improvement, soil health improvement technologies. That's what we're focusing on. So we're saying that so much as other players are there providing services in agriculture, maybe focusing on how they can grow crops and the like, but then Center for Youth and Development, through this project, we're focusing through the project that we're calling the future is in the soil. We're focusing on improving the health of the soil. That is our focus only. So what we're doing is that we're working with grassroots youth community-based organizations, and then through these organizations, we're training them on technologies that they can use to improve the soil. That is what we're doing as a youth organizations. So these community-based organizations, for instance, they also have got similar roles. They can choose a specific area that they want to focus on, whether it's animal husbandry or whether it's crop husbandry. They can choose either. If they choose crop and then they focus on providing trainings either, or awareness, or an extension service to people in the communities on how to do such as how they can work on crop husbandry or how they can work on animal husbandry. So they have got that role. While if we can look at other NGOs, non-governmental organizations, they also have got similar roles. We have got I'll give examples of here in Malawi. We've got organizations that are carrying out like large-scale projects focusing on agriculture, where they also give out farm inputs to farmers, or then apart from that, then they provide extension service on the new methods of farming, and then they also provide capacity building on issues on how they can grow crops, and then also post-harvest trainings as well. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that it doesn't have to be, the government alone and the young people, the CBOs and other NGOs must also come into play. All right, James. Now the second question comes from Ibrahim Anthony, and he asks, how can the youth get advice on how to write project proposals on agricultural issues to the government to get funding and loans? Now, I know we talked about finances and funding. So how can the people, how can the young people go about writing project proposals? I think this is a general question, but would you kindly, address it?
Yes, I think for me to better address that question, I would look at it as how best can we finance agriculture to young people, for young people probably, and then I'll mainstream to focusing on issues to do with project proposals and the like. In terms of financing for agriculture, I think the first one, I think I already talked about it. It's about loans. Young people can also get financed through loans, so they can get a loan, and after they get a loan, then they carry out maybe they start like an agricultural project and the like. Apart from that, I'm sure that grants, it's another component. So when it comes to grants, then people should be able to write proposals. There are a number of organizations out there. Here in Malawi, we've got like the development partners like the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. It is out there. We've got the WFP, World Food Program. We've got the I think another organization we can look at. I think there are a number of organizations that can be able to provide grants to organizations and even to young people. But I think what we need to understand is that firstly, these organizations are able to provide grants to organizations. Most donors do not fund individuals; they fund organizations. So what is important is that young people should be able to form a group. They should be able to come together. When they come together, they form a group, and then through that group, they can develop a proposal to government and the like. What we should do is that we can also provide links. Maybe after when Paul is editing, we can provide links in terms of where young people can get advice in general in terms of developing a proposal, how best they can develop a proposal. I know of a website, Funds for NGOs. Funds for NGOs, it provides a lot of advice in terms of proposal development, in terms of how people can develop the log frame and the like. So I think that is a very specific question that is looking at general how best can we develop proposals. I'm sure that that one can be dealt maybe better on another platform. Not specifically on this one, but then these are some of the methods that we can use in terms of fundraising. And then I think here in Malawi, what is also coming out is what we're calling contract farming. Contract farming, it's working mostly in the tobacco sector. where we have got companies that are buying tobacco in Malawi. Let's say we've got like the African Leaf Tobacco Company, which is buying tobacco, or the Alliance One Tobacco Company, which is buying tobacco in Malawi. So these companies, what they do is that they contract farmers. So they go out in communities, they get farmers, they provide extension services to these farmers, then they give them agricultural loans. They give them loans, fertilizers, even herbicides and the like, for them to be able to grow the tobacco. After they grow tobacco, this farmer is supposed to sell through this company. It's supposed to sell its tobacco to this company specifically. So contract farming is one of the methods that young people can be able to get to finance their agriculture. So there are many strategies, I'm sure.
All right, James. Yeah, thanks. So we are actually going to address project proposal thing, in another forum. But thank you all the same, and we're going to provide links, on social media so that young people out there can access them and see how they can benefit from them. So the other question, I think we've already addressed this one about capital, but the other question is, what voice do you think we can put across to those in authority? I'm assuming here we mean the government, about issues of access to land and the exorbitant prices of agricultural inputs. If you address that one.
Yeah, I think there are many ways, but then I think what is coming, I think one of the ways is that we can try to develop a communique. We can develop a communique or more of a petition, which can go to all heads of states, and this can go through the AU. So what we can do is that as Network of African Youths for Development, we can simply compile a list of issues which are coming out, and then the recommendations that are there, and then we address that to the chairperson of the AU, and then the chairperson. But then this is heading to all heads of states. That means we should be able to, it can also reach governments. But then the other platform is that we can also work on building what we're calling country movements, probably, where what we can do is countries that are interested, young people that are interested from various countries can come up with, can build movements in those countries. So through those movements, they can also deliver the petition directly to maybe heads of states or to whatever authority, but through the so that it goes to the heads of states.
All right, James, thanks. So I believe we'll be looking at this with Paul and you later on to see how we can come up with these recommendations and then address them to the AU and probably to the heads of the nations. So a few minutes ago, someone asked me, and this is like the second last question, someone asked me that, the young people in Africa, and this is specific, but probably you can look at it. They have a project. They have water. They have seeds. They have everything they need. The only thing that they actually need is machines like water pumps and the like. And so this young person asked me, there are people in other countries like in China, in India, that produce these machines. So how can we make sure that probably these companies producing these machines can link up with the young people in Africa and form a partnership of some sort, probably provide them with the machines, and later on they can service the loans or something. What do you think about this?
I think that's a very good idea. As I pointed out earlier on, that agriculture as it is, without technology, without the machines, it is not appealing. So, and then it also means that it is labor intensive if there are no machines. So if young people can have access to machines, it is very important in agriculture for them to have access to machines, because they'll be able to like work on the farms, because it is going to be appealing to them, and then it also means that it's not going to be a lot of work. What I can also say is that the idea that we can work on linking young people with those that produce the machines, that's another very good strategy that we can use. But I also think that in these countries, in these very same countries that these young people are, the government can also work out a way of linking young people with companies that are already in those countries. So what is more important is that I believe young people should come together first. We should not work as individuals. We should not work in isolation. We should come together as a group. We have the rest, and then work out a way of accessing a loan to get these to get these machines. And then when we get these machines, and then we service that loan. But then, as Network of African Youths for Development, we can also try to look at try to identify maybe partners that are out there, and then these partners, we try to link them with these farmers that are established. And then we can also look at if there is anything, like if there are some young people that are really interested, we can also work out a way of trying to develop what we're calling like what they are calling crowd fundraising, so that maybe young people should be able to raise funds through the crowd. Or apart from that, we can develop a platform where young people should be able to post their project ideas. Maybe the platform is already there. We can use the very same website that we have, but then young people should be able to share out their project ideas. This is what we want to do. And then when they share out their project ideas, then you can share it out, maybe try to market it out as NAYD, and then see what can come next. So those are some of the suggestions I can just put forward.
All right. So I actually agree with you, but you know, one thing about these people, and even when you're forming partnerships with other people, these people want to see somebody who's actually done something. You know, the problem with African young people these days is that they have big dreams. They have a lot of things they actually want to do, and I suppose that's the same thing with agriculture. But they actually haven't done anything. They're not proactive. So even if you you actually go to people and say, we would want you to partner with these people, how can we partner with people who've not done anything? So that's another thing that I think, you know, despite of the challenges, you know, funds and everything, I think we have to start with what we have. Young people have to start with what they have, and then, you know, then we can try and forge these partnerships with other organizations. So now I'll try and talk to Yvonne now. Yvette, sorry. Yvette, can you hear me? Yvette? So before we get to her, James, I'll ask you one final question. So this one is about networking and linking up. So you find that there are young people, probably there are young people in Cameroon, in Malawi, in Kenya, you know, even if they're not many, but probably they're there, people who are interested in agriculture, people who are actually, you know, farming and using these things that we've already talked about them. How do you think, or what is the importance of such people coming together and forming networks in terms of probably e-farming, for example? And how can such people form links that would actually make it easier for them to access markets elsewhere, and even to get access to, you know, new technology as it comes out? Yeah, so what do you think about that?
All right, thank you so much. I think that's very important. I've personally believed in the power of networking. I think networking has helped me a lot. I've learned a lot in terms of networking, not only maybe in terms of issues of what we're talking about agriculture, but I think I've learned a lot. Issues to do with development, issues to do with, let's say, project development and the like, all that through networking. So I'm sure that if young people can come together and network, be able to share lessons in terms of the projects that they're implementing relating to agriculture, I'm sure that would really help. I know of a movement whereby young people, it's called Young Professionals for, we're calling it Young Professionals for Agricultural Development, YPAD. And this movement, the YPAD movement, it is there so that it's more of an online and offline communication, which is a discussion platform, and it's aimed at young people trying to realize their full potential and then contribute towards the innovative agricultural development, contribute their ideas towards agricultural development and the like. So I look at it as a big resource as well. And maybe what we can do as NAYD is to encourage, we can sell it on the, we can look at it and then be able to sell it on our maybe social networking and the like. And then if young people are interested in agriculture, they can be able to share their ideas through this. There are a lot of ideas, there are a lot of blogs, people are talking about agriculture, they're talking about their innovative ideas in agriculture and the like. So networking is very, very important, and young people will be able to learn a lot about farming and agriculture in general through this website as well.
All right. Thanks, James. I seem to have lost Yvette, but I think we've come to the end of it. But before we go, James, would you, give your final remarks? Tell people who are young people out there who are actually, following this discussion. Give them tips, give them ideas. And what do you think?
Thank you so much. Lastly, I would like to say that we as young people, we must work together. We should be the ones to start things. I don't think we would be able to make any progress or be able to ask for help even when we have not started anything. So what is important is that we need to start something on the ground. When we've started, if we're talking about machines, I don't think the most important thing is that we should have a machine and then we start working. What is important is that we need to start working on the ground. We need to start farming. We need to start the agriculture. And then when it is growing, that's when we can demand the machines. And when the machines comes, we should be able to continue. Otherwise, I think agriculture is possible, and agriculture is very important for us African youths because, one, we're talking about food, and food is our livelihood. And secondly, we're talking about agriculture as a business, where we as young people would be able to self-employ ourselves and be able to raise money through agriculture. So I'm urging all African youths to participate in agriculture, look at agriculture positively, and then at the same time, I'm calling upon governments and other stakeholders so that we can work on trying to make sure that the spirit of agriculture has cultivated in young people while they're still young, or while they're still in primary school probably, and then they should be able to grow with agriculture, and then they should be able to work in agriculture and participate in agriculture. Because currently, if we're looking at statistics, we will notice that a lot of people who are participating in agriculture are those in the old age. For example, in Malawi, people who are participating in agriculture are about 46. Yet the life expectancy in Malawi is that at 52. So you notice that if it is at 52 and young people are not participating in the next 10 years, we won't even have people who will be participating in agriculture. And then what are we going to eat? Yet Malawi is dependent on agriculture. So those are the questions we need to ask ourselves, and we need to accept agriculture as a profession, and it is a good profession. Thank you so much. Those are my last remarks.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us and actually giving us very insightful, comments. I'm sure everybody will, appreciate, and we actually appreciate you. So finally, to end it all, I think, young people, as James has said, we actually need to start doing something. We need to be proactive. If we seek to have funding, to forge partnership with other organizations and groups, we need to be doing something in the first place. And it's actually possible for young people to farm. For once, we'll have food to feed Africa, and then we'll have actually money. We'll generate money for ourselves and for our livelihoods. So I think it's about time young people in Africa reconsidered the fact that agriculture is considered for the old people. And as James has said, if the young people who, if the people who are doing agriculture now are the old people, then who will feed Africa in the next 10 or 20 years? That's the question. Thank you very much for following, the discussion. And on behalf of NAYD, I would like to thank everybody who made this discussion possible. Thank you.